morning, everybody, or afternoon, or whatever it is. It's afternoon, I guess. And thank you all for coming out here in the rain. And it's nice to see you all again so very soon. Today, we have called a special advisory committee meeting to really focus in on one matter, and that's a very important matter, and that's the hardship waiver proposal of the Constitutional Law Issues Subcommittee. We've called this meeting because of the importance of this particular proposal and the discussion that it may provoke. And with that, maybe we should find out who's on the phone, Henry?
Indeed.
Okay, everybody on the phone, now tell me who you are.
Oh, this is Harry Wingo from Google.
This is Charles Warfield from ICBC.
This is Ray Gutierrez.
Diane Sutter, Shooting Star Broadcasting.
This is Ray Gutierrez from Showtime Networks.
Ralph Everett from the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies.
Tony Bush. Susan Patrick.
Loretta Polk from NCTA.
Chanel Hardy, National Urban League.
Lisa Pickram, RLJ.
And Lucy, CBS Showtime.
Alonzo
Marsh,
Barber,
AT&T
BT Networks.
Could you repeat that one more time?
Alonzo Barber from BET.
Joan Marsh, AT&T.
Andre Copeland, Verizon.
Steve Hillard from Council Tree.
Anyone else? Thank you. Why don't we go around the room so the people on the phone know who's in the room? Eloise Gore.
Eloise Gore. Commissioner Clyburn's office. He's in the room.
Okay.
Justice Center.
Karen Narasaki, Age American Justice Center.
Melissa Newman Quest.
Ronald Johnson, Ronson Networks.
Jane Mago, NAB.
Andy Schwartzman, Media Access Project. Daniel Kahn, Covington and Burling.
John Blake, Covington and Burling.
David Honig, MMTC.
Jamila Best Johnson, FCC.
Barbara Kreisman, FCC.
And your humble chairman, Henry Rivera. So, well, thank you. Let me add my welcome to Barbara's, and thank you, intrepid souls who braved today's rain. Jim Assey's joined us from NCTA. Welcome, Jim. Nice to see you, sir. So, as Barbara suggested, we have a proposal from David Honig's subcommittee on constitutional issues. This would be a recommendation to the commission to adopt a notice of proposed rulemaking. And he's brought with him Jonathan Blake and Jonathan's great team from Covington, who have put in countless hours working on this recommendation and discussing it with various folks in the commission prior to bringing it to you here. From here, assuming that it is adopted, we will then take it up to the commissioners and brief them. And hopefully we would get some movement on this recommendation, and the commission would issue the notice. So with those brief introductory remarks, I will turn it over to David.
Thank you, Henry, very much. First, I wanted to... Is it on?
They'll cut it on in a minute. They'll cut it on in a minute.
Just give it a moment. Just speak into it and just give it a minute.
First, I want to thank the 7 members of the Constitutional Issues Subcommittee who worked very hard to review and frame drafts of this recommendation that is going to be presented today. On October 7th, the subcommittee met and approved it to be transmitted for the consideration of the full committee at the meeting that we're having today. John Blake and his team from Covington put in Herculean efforts to get this, we think, just right. It really takes off upon, builds upon, and improves upon the framework that over the last year and a half the Diversity Committee developed under the rubric of full file review. We think this is even better. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to John to present it to you.
Thank you, Henry and David. You've already had Jason, Libby, and Dan introduce themselves, so I don't have to do that, but they've done great work. The core concept of our proposal, as David said, builds very heavily on the prior work of the advisory committee and of the Constitutional Issues Subcommittee. And our role has been to shape, explain, and defend it in order to obtain the support of the FCC, hopefully all 5 commissioners, and to make a difference. And all of us feel, I know on our team, and many in the firm who know about it feel that it's been an honor to be asked to play this role, and I certainly feel that way. It has been a very cooperative enterprise with lots of people, including the people on the committee and in outreaching to commission staff people as well. The basic concept is that the commission has a preference program that covers licenses awarded by competitive bidding. And under the rules now, those preferences are to be awarded to small businesses and rural telcos. And those rules apply to both broadcast and non-broadcast licenses, any licenses that are subject to competitive bidding. Our proposal would create a new additional preference, overcoming disadvantage. On page 4 of the draft proposal, we list disadvantages that would qualify, but it's not meant to be an exclusive list. We're not that omniscient, and maybe the government isn't either. So there ought to be flexibility for people to come in and show additional grounds for receiving a preference on the basis of disadvantage. And that list shows some of the people are victims of natural disaster, physical handicaps, discrimination due to race or gender, and we've listed, 5 or 6 additional ones. Again, not an airtight set of categories. Whether somebody was entitled to a preference because of a disadvantage and on the grounds that they have overcome it or are overcoming it would be done on a individual basis. There couldn't be any presumption based on one particular category. It would have to be shown in the case of each individual. That is what builds off the idea that this committee has developed over the course of 2 years, that it's a sort of a full file review, examination of the qualifications of particular applicants, as in the case most famously in college and graduate school applications in educational institutions. So that's the core concept that we would apply to overcoming disadvantage. The document, I'm not going to go through it in detail. Pages 2 and 3 list the objectives that we believe are race neutral. As we said, pages 3 and 4 give examples of disadvantages that would qualify. Page 5 talks about efforts to overcome, because that would be part of the test. Applicants would have to be otherwise qualified. That's discussed on page 6. And then there's the kind of oddball issue of what happens if somebody's so wealthy that they don't need a bidding credit. And because one of the rationales for the program is that it will improve the applicant pool that the commission gives licenses to, that who might otherwise be excluded or undervalued in the licensing process of the FCC. If somebody's already wealthy, then they're probably not being excluded. So that's sort of the rationale. With respect to all of these issues that we address, we've tried to be helpful in terms of identifying the issues and making suggestions that we hope are constructive for the commission, but it would have to be worked out in a notice of proposed rulemaking. In the rulemaking proceeding, we thought that was a good idea because the commission has its own ideas about, for example, how its processes might be adapted to evaluate applicants for a disadvantaged preference. Then page 7 through 10 talks about some of the implementation issues, one of which is one I just mentioned. And the last section talks about why this proposal meets various legal standards. I think that sort of gives you the overview of what the proposal tries to do and why it looks to us as if it holds together quite solidly in terms of objectives and in terms of legal standards. I think that's a point where we're happy to discuss or have questions or.
All right, well, thank you again, John, and to your team for all the great work here. It's obvious, given the presentation and the document that you all produced. Now, are there any questions for John and his team? Andy.
First, I want to express my appreciation for the work that was done and something I think is a very constructive and far-sighted plan. And had I not been unavoidably detained at the last minute, I would have said so at the subcommittee meeting on Tuesday. But my question is with respect to the legal analysis at the end of the memo, which I find very persuasive, but you don't discuss any countervailing arguments. I wonder if there are any cases or any circuits that might have any adverse precedent that might argue against adopting something like this.
Well, as probably all of you know, this area of the law is very complicated. And you read Supreme Court decisions that it's a 5-4 decision, and there have been 3 judges who've left.
Excuse me, those of us on the phone can't hear.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is that better?
It is, thank you.
I'm addressing myself to Andy instead of the microphone. And the other interesting thing is this is a pretty new concept. And Dan went through and looked for all kinds of other government programs that we might be able to analogize to. And we did that at the request of the General Counsel's office. We gave it to them and said, here's what you asked for. And they said, well, this doesn't really help us very much because our program is so different. So they said, don't include it in the report. So we think it works. It's a complicated area, but we think it doesn't go as far. It isn't as aggressive as some of the cases that have raised problems, including the ones that have won in the past. And we think, as David just said, we think it accomplishes a lot because it is targeted toward disadvantages, and that makes it kind of more. We think it makes it less challengeable, less vulnerable, but we also think it accomplished something in a discrete area that's valuable. I want to add one other thing. Aaron Dozier, who I know was here for you, Jane, at the last meeting we had in June, raised a very important point about an hour and a half ago, which is better than an hour ago or an hour from now. And that is that we reference a rule on page 1. Our intention is that this would apply to both broadcasting and all other licenses that are subject to auction. And she pointed out that there's a rule applying to broadcasting that maybe we ought to include or reference or propose to amend. In that 90-minute period, we think we don't have to do that, but we think it's desirable to go back and point it out. And we would love, the rest of the afternoon to determine that there's no exceptions in the rule, proving a negative in a way that would cause us to have to do something more than just explaining that it covers across the board. And thanks, Aaron.
Other questions? Jane?
Let me amplify that just a little bit if I can, which is that, the intention of the proposal here, which I agree with everyone, is extraordinarily well done, and I really do congratulate the team on what was an exceptional effort on all of this. I think was to set this up for the commission so that in the rulemaking proceeding, the commission is going to be looking at it, and I know that the commission will be trying to look at all the different pieces and making sure that all the rules that might be affected here would be addressed in that rulemaking proceeding, where there'd be the opportunity for anyone else to comment and find some of the other pieces. But it certainly was the intention of the subcommittee and the group that this apply to all of the services, and just want to make that very clear through all of this.
Thank you. Any other questions for John or David? How about anybody on the phone have anything they want to ask? All right, hearing none, I'm going to assume that you're ready for the question. Is that an adequate assumption?
Could we have a clarification? Is the vote on the question of this proposal as possibly modified with the addition of the rules citation that you're referring to?
Right. It won't change it substantively. It just...
Can you repeat the clarification? It was hard to hear.
The clarification, it already says it would apply to broadcasting and all other licenses subject to auction. The rule citation is to a general rule that we would presume applies to all services. There's a special rule for broadcasting, which we think is additive and not a substitute. So we don't want to say, here's the fix, I think I know what it is now, without going back and making sure that it is sufficient, covers all the bases. And I mean, I would think the change might be at most a sentence and maybe just another citation.
So is it fair to say that we're voting on the proposal as distributed, plus the addition of a possible sentence that would make it clear that it also applies to broadcast?
I'd recommend that be with minor editorial privileges.
Which this would fall
in the
into.
tradition of the commission.
Perfect.
All right, then all in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about since you all came out of the rain?
We will, just an administrative note, we will meet again on December 2nd. That would be our last meeting under this charter. And I will let you know as soon as I hear anything about whether we're going to be rechartered or the committee's going to be rechartered, and if so, how, when, and all that sort of thing. As of this time, I know nothing. I'm sorry to tell you.
Should I assume that it's going to be 2 p.m. on the 2nd?
Yes.
Yes, that's a valid assumption.
That is
Yeah.
an absolute, that's correct.
Thank you, Andy.
Because I had to fight for the room on the 2nd, and the combined federal campaign has it in the morning. And you might have to sit among cakes, because I've heard they are very
Oh, that would be
happy
terrible.
I twisted their arm to take the room in the afternoon.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
would we be able to get a report from the commissioners' offices about where they have taken all of our collective recommendations, what the status is?
That's a very good point, and I'm not sure that we have, well, I do know that the recommendations have not risen to the level of the commissioners' offices. My understanding is that they're still at OCBO. And David, I don't know, do you want to, David has been meeting with OCBO in an attempt to move these forward. Do you want to report on where we are?
Sure. Most of the recommendations of the Diversity Committee, those that specifically relate to ownership, diversity, and equal employment opportunity, have been organized along with other recommendations made from public interest groups, and particularly MMTC, into tranches and in a big binder and presented to the chair and then referred by him to OCBO in March. And there have been 2 long meetings with MMTC's staff and OCBO's staff to go through these. They've been narrowed down to some 72 recommendations, the committee having been rather prolific. And thus far, we're waiting for word on the circulation of these items to the bureaus, input from the bureaus, and then some decisions will need to be made about what goes up to the floor and in what form and which tranches. Tom Reed and I are going to be getting together every 2 weeks until we complete that process.
Actually, Tom Reed gave a very extensive report during our last meeting, which was nearly a month ago. And that transcript you should be able to find on the website if you need to review it.
referring to December since that might be our last meeting.
Right.
Nice to know.
Believe that Tom had planned to get us all a written update, which he stated that at the last meeting, to accomplish that very fact. So I think his plan is to do that prior to our last meeting.
Yeah, well, I've got my fingers crossed. I hope that's the case also, Diane, and we will, I will ask Tom to come to the meeting on December 2nd and make such a report, if he's able to do that. Anything else anybody wants to bring up? By the way, Rosemary Harold has joined us from Commissioner McDowell's office. Welcome, Rosemary. Always nice to see you. All right, then. We will be adjourned until December 2nd. Thank you again. Good work here. Thank you again to the Covington team. Let's give them a hand. Great job. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.